All right. So, how do I actually reach out to people? What do I say? I hear this question all the time from founders and other professional peers. We're back for another episode of Listening In on Lindsay. It's a video series where I share conversations that I have with founders and my peers that I am meeting for the first time. Networking is something a lot of people feel really ick about, which is unfortunate because our personal and professional networks have a world of opportunities to offer us if we're just willing to talk to new people or reach out to those we haven't spoken to in a while. So, let me just introduce you to today's guest, Cindy Guyon, founder and CEO of Linking Ventures, which provides valuations for early stage funding. Should be super interesting conversation. So, Cindy, how did you decide and when did you decide to start Linking Ventures?
Well, I'll tell you, it's really interesting because I used to be trained in traditional valuations, and I was often called to defend these old valuations that were 3 months old or a year old, and some of them were really overinflated, and you're actually seeing a lot of that right now. So what I did was I actually figured out that well, let's take a look at it from this way. It's a fun way to look at it. We think about Shark's Tank. We think about all of these Shark Tanks or Dragon's Den type things where you see a founder walk up one after the other saying, my company is worth a $5 million, $10 million, $1 billion. And inevitably, the investors would laugh and the founders would cry, right? Because these valuations are actually designed to package a company for sale, exit, IPO, merger acquisition, that wonderful what we call 409A. So when you apply that same I'm going to sell this company methodology to a company that has nothing to sell, there's nothing there to stick to. So what? And it becomes a lot more art than science at that earliest stage, right? So what we've done is we've actually built in metrics and built in information that is based on how the early stage technology startup maneuvers their way through those earliest stages. So what gets measured gets done. And that's what makes it exciting because we've taken the valuation out of or let's say we'll shared it between what the investors know and their brilliant minds and put that into the hands of the investor because both sides should be equally involved in that relationship and understand how they maneuver their way through. So
Cool.
it becomes more of a journey rather than just a here's what we do.
Cool. So, how long, when did you guys found this company?
I've been working on it for a very long time. I've navigated the startup ecosystem for decades.
Yeah,
But the official platform really was started pushing out in January of this year. But
cool.
we did have a number of older valuations, clients that we've been working with that have come along with us over the last year or so.
So, you were doing a little more like service-based work to develop the platform.
Precisely, precisely.
Cool. I love that. I think that doing consulting work helps you learn so much about what needs to go into a product. And it's definitely one way that founders, especially non-technical founders, can de-risk what they invest into software development is if they offer the service and then slowly productize it to see where the standardization exists. So
And
very
I have
cool.
just enough of a technical background to be dangerous. I come from a technical family. My mom was a DBA, so I developed my first database for Auto Trader magazine, and my first learning management system for a large financial brokerage company out here as well. So I did dabble in building out the MVP. I built out the MVP myself.
That's cool. I took relational database management when I was a sophomore in college, and the organizer in me loved it. Loved it. And I will tell people that even now, almost 20 years later, knowing how databases are designed and built and function is one of the top skills that helps me communicate well with software developers. I don't have to actually design databases, but it helps to understand the relationships between objects and the way in which I communicate with developers and talking about that. Awesome. So, I'm looking at your email from yesterday, and you said you'd like to chat about a partnership for product market fit. in the persona section of the valuations platform. So why don't you tell me more about what you were thinking?
So I also wanted to add, just to take a step back, that 96% of all valuations are biased. And let's
Mm,
face it, the extra 4%, it's just kind of dismissed. So what we've done is we've kind of gone right into depth, into product design, service design, and governance, so that it's actionable change rather than checkbox change. So
mhm,
a great example of one of the companies that we're working with is their cardio health platform specifically for women of color, which answers the call that universal signs and symptoms of heart attack are the crushing sensation in the chest and the radiation of up and down the left arm, which does not apply to women at all. So when we talk about building out personas, and this is something that I really want to find somebody who understands it and eats it, leaps and breathes it, much like you do, so that we can automate that understanding and have somebody go into the platform, um, go out to your platform, fill out the information, understand how to do the personas, and the fact that they have that knowledge wrapped around it, understanding their niche market, but all the different nooks and crannies of that niche market, right? So if I'm going after stay-at-home moms that have two children, are you exploring those stay-at-home moms with two children that are visually impaired? Are you dealing with those stay-at-home dads that have two children and all these different little nooks and crannies? So
why is that important for valuations to get that small?
the well, I'd actually kind of, so if you have that market, and this is where your kind of expertise comes into play, but understanding who your ultimate market is gives you the platform to really get that feedback from the people that love you best. And this is not, it's not us as the founder of a company trying to dictate and say, this is my audience. And this is one of the things that I heard from you over and again. And the way you framed it just kind of reinforced it. It's about listening to that niche market and having them tell you what you need to do so that you can then expand that beyond that network. But in
So
terms of
is
valuation, though, having that understanding and what I like to equate it to, and one of the metrics we play around with, or a group of metrics, is your traction and your product development. So, are you proving it out, or are you way too focused on your product? If you're way too focused on your product, then perhaps you're not listening enough to the people that are actually want to use it.
well, I agree with that part. I guess I'm trying to understand, say I can help your startups to get very specific in their niche. What's the output that you need in order to produce a more accurate and fair valuation?
So that component fits into a number of the categories. I have on the dashboard, there is a number of balance metrics. So it
Hmm.
actually plays out to that. But the whole purpose of the process, the valuation is no longer a one-off, let's just go and give me the information you have today. It becomes an iterative process that captures your ability to build focus and or make mistakes and correct them as you maneuver your way through a multitude of milestone triggered valuations.
So do
So let's,
you, I'm sorry, I want to make sure
oh,
I'm understanding correctly. So please don't be
yeah,
offended if
no,
I
no, no,
interrupt you. So I guess I'm wondering is like, do you want number of people, dollars spent, uh, eh,
no.
like because usually that type of stuff goes into um, how we talk about customer segmentation and goes into the potential revenue that you can capture based on the number of people. So I guess I want to back up again because I am on the venture and investor side. Why is it a problem for a pre-seed company to pitch investors and say, our value, we're raising at a 4.5 million valuation? Like, why is it a problem for everyone that that 4.5 is not accurate?
Well, I guess the biggest reason is it's a guess. So at the earliest stages, you're really taking into account what other male-led companies have been raising at. And we're watching this massive stabilization drop because you've seen these overinflated valuations that have walked out chasing unicorns and rainbows. And it's not about chasing rainbows and unicorns, right? Those are mythical creatures.
Mm-hmm.
What we should be doing is taking into account what the companies are actually doing, the amount that they've raised, the teams that they're looking at, all of these checkbooks things, and then test them. And
Yeah.
then, which is what we're doing, is pursuing duck-billed platypuses. Because for all their uniqueness, they're still based in reality. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why that 4.5 isn't really, it's more art than science, right? If you've got a 4.5 and you're raising a Series B, that's a whole different ball. Well, it would be bit of a
That
different
wouldn't
ball game,
really
but
make
at a
sense.
stage, right? No, but let's say
Yeah.
series like a 4.5 at a Series A, then you have a price round. You've already done a price round, so you've already stabilized into the market. So the valuations that we produce only go up to seed. Once
Mm-hmm.
there's a priced round, that's at that point the traditional valuations then take over. But we neglect to recognize the valuation conversations that happen before a priced round. So when you're putting that cap table together as an example, and you're building out your founder equity, as much as it's not a 409A version of a valuation, it's still a valuation conversation, even if it's really low. So you would set up your cap table, you put that, you know, zero point zero 0.01 common share on there and option pool. It's still something that as a founder you need to understand. It's not an investor conversation. It's just
Mm-hmm.
with your team. And then when you get out to that pre-seed round, and let's face it, most female founders just skip right past that pre-seed round because they're bootstrapping their way through and they're too nervous to ask mom and dad, and this is for underrepresented founders as well. It's not a mom and dad conversation.
Or
It
mom and
could
dad
be a
don't have
close,
the resources to help.
well, precisely, or
Yeah.
you don't have mom and dad here in this country.
Yeah.
So the other point is like you have to understand that that could be your close associates. There's
Mm-hmm.
this group of non-investors who really strongly believes in you. How do you have that safer or convertible debt conversation? And what risk are you taking on the safe side? What risk are you
Right.
taking on the
It
convertible debt? It is a valuation conversation, but just not a 409A version of it, right?
it does remind me of a startup that I performed due diligence on, and the round they were raising at the valuation, it was like an 8 million valuation, but they had only gotten like 25 grand in revenue, and they had just picked that number because their friends and family round was at a 4 million valuation, and they needed to like show improvement, but the follow-on investors weren't going to invest at an 8 million valuation with only 25K in revenue. So it can create problems for you down the road if you don't have a more realistic check on your valuations. And it also should, sorry, it also should help you in negotiating with investors what your like minimum is if they try to negotiate that valuation down so they can take a larger percentage of your company.
Exactly. And understanding what that conversation should be. Majority of founders walk in with that artistically made
Mhm.
number and go, it's this valuation because my 5-year revenue and EBITDA. Why are you dealing with 5-year
Yeah.
revenue and EBITDA when you're SaaS? That doesn't work.
Yeah.
But there's just all of these components and metrics that we're pulling out of the air to pull into a calculator for a one-time valuation that if you just had this massive surge of success 2 weeks ago doesn't
Yeah.
reflect, right?
Right.
So
So
it has to be so much more dynamic.
is the idea that founders would sign up with Linking Ventures and be able to track these stats so they have like real-time valuations?
Precisely,
Cool.
precisely.
You should say that like at the beginning is like we
I
are a
should.
platform for startups to input important stats and track their real-time valuation in order
Mhm.
to better negotiate on their behalf.
Indeed, indeed.
There
And
you
it's
go.
founder immersive.
Yeah.
I like that.
So, okay, so back to this question about carving out a piece that helps with personas. You said and your niche markets. You said something correct, and that like most founders like spend too much time on product and haven't narrowed down to that early evangelist, which I spoke to yesterday in the co-founders lab talk. So I guess the question though is I still am at the like, how does narrowing down helps them de-risk and adjust their
Yes.
product development strategy and their marketing strategy. But does any of that output directly go into your platform to inform valuation?
It does. It does very much at a binary level. Do you have it or don't you have it? And we
Mm.
have a series of questions right now that we ask. And if you're able to fill in that information, then you essentially get a
But
checkbox out.
everyone
It's
will
all
say,
weighted out.
see, here's the problem though, is
Yeah.
every founder thinks they know their customer. That's the thing is
Yes.
even founders that go through, for example, some of the more science-based startups go through like National Science Foundation here in the US. And part of the iCore, you have to go do 30 user interviews. But from what I've heard from mentors in that program, they do all those user interviews and they're no better off. Like they don't ask the right questions, they don't talk to the right people, they don't act or identify the right insights. So founders are gonna, I have a fundraising quiz. People can fill out my fundraising quiz and have you identified your early customer segment. And everyone says yes. Like everyone says yes, but it's not actually true. So
Yeah.
how do
And
you how do
it's
you help them do a better job?
it's about so it's the metrics, and this is one of the conversations I wanted to have with you because w- and I'm obsessed with Gabriel Weinberg and Jason. I cannot remember his name. I apologize, and I keep forgetting. But traction, and
Hmm.
if you can take on a behemoth like Google in their own market, like
Hmm.
DuckDuckGo did, then you've got something. So it's kind of balancing that in April Dunford's obviously awesome, where they talk about positioning, and I read your book and I love it too.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
but the combination of all those things pull out metrics where you start to look at things where how many unique users are you bringing in to the amount of money that you're spending on marketing? So that's
Hmm.
one of the ones. And then how much revenue or what's your LTV to CAC?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of relating the information that you're putting in terms of how you're developing out those personas and what are those stories, because those stories are more critical. So when we kind of have the conversation, one of the things I'm building out and very much learned from you as well from yesterday is that it's not a matter of going, here's my Tam Sam Song. That just really reflects how trendy the market is, right? And that
Right.
you know that your market's really cool. Okay.
And
But it
big
has
and
no,
big enough for you to grow into $100 million
exact.
business, right?
Exactly. It has that scalability, tangibility, and that's just wonderfully sexy to investors. So that's great, and you can capture that. But how are you maneuvering or navigating your way through understanding and spending on achieving information from and balancing that at the same time with your balancing at the same time as building out your product,
Yeah.
right? How are you not building those blinders in? And that LTV CAC is my favorite metric.
So,
Really kind of
yes.
plays around with that a bit, but I am working with on a project to see if I can build out more metrics that assess that balance. So on the Linking Ventures platform, we have what we call balance metrics, and this is one of the key or critical elements is at any given time, are you balancing your product development um, with your persona or with your
Your market, what your
revenue
market
market?
wants.
There you
So,
go.
so tell me, how do you think I can help you? Like, in what capacity do you think I could fit in, or my lab's content could fit into what you're doing for your startups?
It's all about automation. Right now, a lot of the companies want to be able to go in and do this on their own and do that modeling. They want to hear us talk about it, but they also want to be able to go and work through it. I am not an expert at what you do. You are an expert. So much like with the financials, we have partnerships there where all of the financials go into there, and we just grab that information and model it because the clients that we have, the startups that we have, they only last up to a year. That's usually what our wonderful little LTV side of things are, calculation is. Once they reach seed, they tend to go on. But they will remain with the financial company to keep their financials going. That's what I'd like to be, and it's a plug-in. So they go out to get that information. That information is pulled into the Linking Ventures platform and then modeled. And that's what I'd like to see about building out from the persona side of things is that they would go in, they get to that section of the valuation, and it is dynamic, so they are interacting with this on an ongoing basis. All of that information then pulls up and the calculations pull up when you trigger a valuation. But I'd love to be able to see about building an API into what you do so that they would leave our platform, go out and do their persona modeling with you, and it gives me an opportunity to validate it as well. Because I know what you do. I know your brain kind of wraps around this philosophy quite well. So it almost acts almost like a certification. So once they come back into the system, uh, it's almost like a check mark. So as opposed to just being a simple binary, I can actually put more weight behind the information that comes back into the system.
So are you looking, again, if this is like an API, then you would want me to return something. So what am I returning?
You would be returning almost like a certification of the fact that they understand who the persona is.
Okay.
Mhm. But because we also know that that is a dynamic nature, they would like, and they as they scale, those personas are going to be different. So once they leave us, they would maintain the relationship with you. A 50, 100 employee company still needs this information, and it's still very critical because as they expand their markets, they really need to understand that as well. So that's what we see we see it as building up these relationships very early on so that they can maintain that because these are elements of success that will drive the company through whatever scaling level they're going through.
So it's a definitely very interesting proposition. I think it's a business development conversation that requires multiple conversations to discuss like the implementation needs for
Mhm.
carrying something like this out because my product does not have an API right now. So we can definitely talk about what that integration or partnership looks like. And it does actually depend on how frequently you think customers are going to be checking in with this. I'm going to say that they might do it once uh, or twice, but they probably will not check in as often after that. They might come back to it, but I don't know if we need a
Well,
longer conversation. If we need a longer conversation, because I see personas being used in different ways, and
yeah,
defining the early evangelist is different than starting to define your primary and secondary, tertiary, and non anti personas in
yes,
designing a user interface and product, right? So,
yeah.
one of the other things you said is that you do a panel of investors and startup influencers on product and governance, and that you have one in August. So that's a much easier thing for me to say yes to.
Oh,
So
good.
when is the next one?
It's the first Tuesday of every month, and we get a panelist of influencers and investors together, and we have companies pitch to us in a very different way. We give feedback that is really about how to open up their eyes to different personas that they're not
Yeah,
addressing.
or
Mhm.
and be really constructive rather than judgmental.
Exactly.
So
Mhm.
when is that? I'm looking at my calendar right now.
It's at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the first Tuesday of every month.
Cool. I'm putting it in my calendar right now because if it's not in my calendar, and then you can send me more information.
I will add you, I'll send a panelist link to you.
Did you have any questions for me?
Well,
Besides, I know, I got asked a lot of questions yesterday on this talk for Co-Founders Lab, but um, I'm curious if there's any way that I can help you.
there's one question that it's nagging me, and you did give me a response, but I want to dive into it a little bit deeper. So a number of years ago, I worked at a company called Autodesk, and we went through this training called it was target account selling, and it's about selling into these large accounts, uh, and you'd have to figure out who would actually be the purchase decision maker, and then you have all the really noisy influencers, right? So the CEO would be a great example of that. They're not the ones that are making the purchase decision, that's the purchasing department. But their influence could completely change the direction of everything. So in thinking about that in terms of persona and really what we're doing, because we're a very, very important example, um, our target market, we learn this from listening to our clients and the people that were approaching us saying, we need this, we want this is very
Yeah,
important to
sure.
us. But every time we have the conversation in with investors, and it's not about getting them, it's just the circles we run in. These investors that are not investing in us, we're just going to call them like these personas, they are so quick to jump in to say, no, we're your market. And we need you to change your product to us. And this is what we want to pay, and this is what we want to do. But they don't pay. So we know that they are so they're if they weren't so important to the ecosystem, they would be the negative persona, right? But because they are so influential in what we do, how do we address those influencers that could make or break a lot of this? I guess is the biggest question that I have.
It sounds like more that you should talk to them as if they are strategic partners where there is some value exchange, right? So they're saying that they would pay, but they wouldn't. So then turn around and say, if I were to make these changes that you're asking for, what problem does that solve for you?
Yeah,
What do
that's good.
you stand to gain if I do this? Right. So I believe from the conversation yesterday, the way I had answered it was more as these are advisors giving you an opinion about which startup founders to access and go after. And I said, unless these people are actually these people, you should always prioritize the people that are actually
Yeah.
spending money with you. You should prioritize their opinions first over these people. Now, so the question is why are they so passionate and insistent that you change the people you're targeting? And so the question to them is, what do you stand to gain if I do this? And what do you stand to lose if I don't do this? So that you can understand the size of the problem or the value that this gives them. Okay. And
Okay. Yeah.
maybe they give you a dollar amount, but maybe they finally explain to you what they are trying to accomplish that they cannot accomplish on their own, but think that linking ventures can help them accomplish. Do you have any idea what they are trying to accomplish by getting you to focus on some other segment of entrepreneurs?
Oh, I think they just it's about tapping into the market that they are already addressing. So a lot of them they could be possibly considered as competitors. So they want us to do their version of it better, as opposed to us doing our version in our way.
But
And
if they're not investing in you and they're not
if
referring you clients or anything like that, what is their interest in you changing your strategy besides feeling smart and wanting to hear their smart opinions heard?
that's the point. That's exactly it.
So then, smile and nod and end the conversation.
Yes.
Don't worry about it, but turn around and say, That's a great idea. You always, whenever anyone gives you an unsolicited opinion or opinion and ideas that you don't like, you say, thank you. And then if you want to keep talking to these people, figure out what the value is to them. And if they're not going to pay you in money, are they going to pay you in referrals? Are they going to pay you in exposure? Are they going to give you access to lists of founders or databases of other investors? Like, what are they going to give you if you refocus? What do they stand to gain? And if it is only because they want to hear their smart opinions heard out loud, they like the sounds of their own voices, just say, thank you, let's keep in touch, and don't.
Yes.
like, like, like you have a vision, and I'm going to show everyone this. Like, this is what I gave my partners. It is a tray. This was the Christmas gift this year. It says
Focus on the focus. Yes,
focus
that's
on
good.
focus. That, like I said yesterday, I've seen founders spend 18,000 of the 25,000 they got as part of an accelerator. Spend 18,000 changing the product away from their original vision because the advisors and investors told them that they should. And then they get out of the accelerator and they're like, Lindsay, help me. I need to change it back. And I wasted all that money. Okay. So you are the subject matter expert on your customer and you know who is paying you for this work. Focus on them and what they are asking you for and what they need. Okay.
Indeed.
You got
Thank
to
you.
let everything else fall to the wayside.
Yeah, that's
All
very
right.
validating. Thank you.
So, will you send me information about this panel and maybe we do it in August or we do it in September? Tuesdays are kind of difficult, so I definitely need time to plan ahead. Those are the days I do any one-on-ones with my private clients. So, but I'm
Certainly.
happy to move some stuff around and be available to you.
That sounds wonderful. And yeah, whichever Tuesday you'd like to do, we'll do that. But I'll send you the general link so that you can kind of take a quick look at it, and then you can choose which one, and we'll meet again. This has been wonderful. I have learned so much from you.
Oh, it's great. Well, uh, Cindy Guyon, Linking Ventures, thanks so much for reaching out after yesterday and jumping on video with me and be willing to do this. And I will definitely make sure to include a link to Linking Ventures in the description for this YouTube channel. And for everyone that is watching, that's how you do it. That's how you talk to strangers. Okay. It's not that hard, and you create opportunity, you add value, things are going to happen. All right. See you later.
Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.